My sister's wedding reception. I gave my name to the staff. They said, "Sorry, your name isn't on the guest list." Stunned, I turned to my mother. She smirked. "Did you really think you were invited? Strangers aren't allowed." Then the phone rang. "I'm sorry, but your name isn't on the guest list." The words hit me like a slap across the face. I stood there gripping my purse, my breath caught in my throat. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly straightened blonde hair and an expression of forced politeness, looked at me with something almost like pity. I hated that look. "That must be a mistake," I said, forcing a small, controlled smile. My voice remained calm, but inside something twisted. "The bride is my sister." The woman hesitated, her fingers hovering over the list. She glanced at me, then back down, skimming the names again, but I already knew that first flash of hesitation, that shift in her expression. She wasn't going to find me on that list. My stomach dropped. "Could you check again?" I asked, my fingers tightening around the gift bag I was holding. She nodded quickly, flipping through the pages as if she might have somehow overlooked me the first time. The seconds stretched unbearably long. The sound of clinking glasses and soft classical music floated in from the ballroom behind me. Then the receptionist's expression changed. I knew that look. It was the kind people gave before delivering bad news. She lowered her voice, almost apologetic. "I'm really sorry, Miss Carter, but your name isn't here." I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "Sophia's my sister. I should be on that list." The woman glanced around as if checking whether anyone was listening. Then, in a voice so low I barely heard her, she said, "It wasn't a mistake. Your mother personally requested your name be removed?" For a moment, all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I stared at her, convinced I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" She looked away, uncomfortable. "Your mother told the events staff that you weren't to be admitted under any circumstances," she continued, still hushed, as if that would soften the blow. I'm really sorry. I know this must be awkward." Awkward? That was the word she chose? My own mother had deliberately erased me from my sister's wedding, and all this girl could call it was awkward. A slow, cold numbness spread through me, replacing the initial sting of betrayal. "I see," I said, swallowing hard. But I didn't see. Not really. Yes, my mother had always favored Sophia. That was no secret. But to cut me out completely, to deny my existence on one of the most important days of our family's life, even for her, this was a new level of cruelty. I stood still for a moment, my pulse roaring in my ears. I could turn around, demand an explanation, march straight into the ballroom and make a scene. But what would that accomplish? Would my mother suddenly feign innocence? Would Sophia stare at me, confused, realizing too late what had been done? Or worse, would she already know? I swallowed down the thought. I wasn't going to make a fool of myself here in front of strangers, in a place where I clearly wasn't welcome. If they didn't want me here, I wouldn't stay. I looked down at the carefully wrapped gift in my hands. It was a blanket I'd made myself, white, embroidered with delicate blue flowers. It had taken me 2 months to finish the colors of our father's wedding gift to my mother once upon a time, a relic of love, of family, a family that had just cut me out like I was nothing. Slowly I walked over to the check-in counter where the concierge watched me with thinly veiled curiosity. "Please make sure this gets to the bride," I said, setting the bag down gently. The card beneath the ribbon was simple: for Sophia, wishing you happiness. No more, no less. I adjusted the strap of my purse and turned toward the grand glass doors leading outside. The moment my heels clicked against the marble floor, I felt it, the eyes of people watching me, whispering. The weight of humiliation pressed against my chest, but I forced myself to keep walking, to keep my posture straight. Outside, the night air hit me crisp and sharp against my skin. The street was alive with the soft of Chicago traffic. Cars sped past, their headlights illuminating the sidewalks. Laughter spilled from a nearby rooftop bar where people clinked their glasses in celebration. A celebration I was never meant to be part of. I took a slow breath. My hands trembled slightly as I reached into my purse for my phone. I shouldn't have been surprised. This wasn't the first time my mother had made me feel invisible. Growing up, I had always been the afterthought. While Sophia was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, I had been the inconvenience, the too serious one, the one who wasted her life in a career that wasn't glamorous enough. I had put my dreams on hold to care for our father when he was sick. I'd spent my savings to help Sophia get through law school. And when he passed, I thought naively that my mother and I might have finally found common ground. But love had never been unconditional in our house. It had always been a transaction, and I had never been worth enough. I let out a sharp breath, tightening my grip on my phone. My fingers hovered over Sophia's number. Did she know? Did she realize that I had been cut from her wedding? That our mother had decided I wasn't worthy of even being there? I hesitated, and then before I could second-guess myself, I tapped the screen and called her. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then it went to voicemail, not even an answer. I stared at the screen for a long moment before shoving the phone back into my purse. I should have expected that. Maybe Sophia was too busy. Maybe she had no idea what had happened. Or maybe she had known all along. The thought made my stomach twist. I turned away from the hotel, stepping toward the curb to hail a cab. I wouldn't cry. Not here, not now. But one thing was clear. If they had erased me from their lives, I would make sure they regretted it. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The cab ride home felt like a blur. The city lights flickered past the window, neon signs casting streaks of color across the glass, but I barely saw them. My fingers tapped restlessly against my purse, my mind spiraling through every possible explanation. I could still hear the receptionist's words, "Your mother personally requested your name be removed." I exhaled slowly, my breath shaking as I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. My mother had erased me, not just from the wedding but from the very idea of what family meant. And the worst part? I should have seen it coming. My mother, Victoria Carter, had never made it a secret that I was inconvenient. Sophia had always been her perfect child, the golden daughter, the one who could do no wrong, the one who followed the carefully laid out path, prep school, Ivy League law degree, a fiancé with an impressive last name. And me, I was the afterthought, the girl who wasted her potential on a mediocre career in nursing instead of something prestigious, the one who threw away her youth, taking care of a dying father instead of chasing ambition, the one who had never been enough. But what haunted me the most wasn't the favoritism, it was the lies. Because now I was beginning to realize I had never just been ignored, I had been actively removed. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through years of texts, old messages that suddenly took on a different meaning. "Hey, I sent you a birthday gift. Let me know if you got it. Thinking of you today. Let's catch up soon. Read at 9:43 p.m. No response. Hope the bar exam went well. I'm so proud of you." Left undelivered. I had spent years telling myself Sophia was just busy, that law school had consumed her life, that work was overwhelming. But what if she had never received those messages? What if my mother had been filtering everything, making sure I was nothing more than a distant shadow in Sophia's life, a ghost of a sister? I shoved my phone back into my purse, swallowing down the nausea creeping up my throat. I needed to stop thinking in questions and start looking for answers. And I knew exactly where to start. The moment I stepped into my apartment, I went straight to my bookshelf. Tucked between old medical textbooks and half-read novels was a small wooden box. I pulled it down, my hands steady despite the fire burning in my chest. Inside, neatly folded, were every receipt, every bank statement, every check I had written for Sophia over the years, her tuition, her rent when she was struggling in law school, her textbooks. I had sacrificed my savings, my security, my future to make sure she had the best chance possible, and in return, I had been wiped from existence. I inhaled sharply, willing the anger to stay controlled. I wasn't going to waste energy on emotions that wouldn't serve me. This wasn't just betrayal, this was theft. I placed the box on my desk and opened my laptop. If my mother had gone to such great lengths to erase me, I was going to make sure she regretted it. I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of pettiness. I wanted justice. I wanted truth. I wanted my mother to understand. I wasn't the kind of person who just disappeared quietly, so I started digging. Financial records. I combed through bank statements pinpointing every dollar that had gone to Sophia. Emails, old correspondences between my mother and I back when she still pretended I was part of the family. Legal documents. A file I had tucked away after my father's passing. The one that detailed his life insurance payout. And that was when I found it, a deposit. A large one. One that had been meant for me from my father's policy, except it had never arrived in my account. My breath hitched as I clicked deeper. The payout had been redirected, signed over to another name, Victoria Carter. My stomach twisted. She took my inheritance she had stolen from me, and not just money. She had stolen my choices, my opportunities, my independence. She had taken the last thing my father had left me and used it. For what? To fund Sophia's dream life? To maintain the pristine image of a perfect Carter family? My fingers curled into fists. I had spent years feeling guilty, thinking I had chosen this life, believing I had willingly sacrificed myself for Sophia, but now I realized I had never even been given a choice. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I kept digging. I called my bank. I pulled up credit reports. I contacted an old accountant my father had trusted. And piece by piece, the full picture began to emerge. The life insurance payout meant for me redirected. The college fund I had contributed to for Sophia drained without my knowledge. The birthday gifts, the letters, the messages I sent Sophia never delivered. Victoria Carter had spent years ensuring I was nothing more than a footnote in our family's history. A walking ATM with no voice, no presence, no place. And now she had made the final cut. She had made sure I wasn't even invited to the wedding. The one day meant to be about family, about unity. She had erased me, but what she didn't know, I had just found the proof to destroy the perfect little narrative she built. I stared at my laptop screen, the evidence staring back at me like a loaded gun. I had everything I needed to expose her, to make sure the people she fooled, Sophia, the wedding guests, the society she craved approval from, knew exactly who she really was. I could burn her entire world down with a single email, but I wouldn't rush it, no. She had spent years crafting her lies. I would take my time unraveling them, and when the moment was right, when she least expected it, I would make sure Victoria Carter knew exactly what it felt like to be erased, to be nothing. Because the one thing my mother had always underestimated, I don't disappear, I fight. I stared at my laptop screen, the glow of the financial records casting eerie shadows on my walls. Everything was there, every wire transfer, every redirected deposit, every cent of my father's life insurance money that had been meant for me stolen by my own mother. Victoria Carter had spent years orchestrating my erasure, and now she was celebrating her final triumph. She thought she had won. She thought I had finally disappeared. But she was wrong. I had always known my mother was cold, but there was something particularly cruel about the way she carried herself in public. The way she wore perfection like a designer coat, carefully tailored for admiration. I didn't have to guess where she was now. The morning after the wedding, she would be having brunch at the Hanover Club, her favorite nest of high society gossip. For women like Victoria, reputation was everything. It was the air they breathed, the currency they used, the weapon they wielded against anyone who threatened their carefully curated image. And me? I had been the blemish she spent years trying to scrub away. I could already picture her there, flawless in a cream-colored cashmere set, her pearls catching the morning light as she sipped imported tea surrounded by her circle of admirers. Talking about Sophia's perfect wedding, talking about how relieved she was that it had gone off without a hitch, talking about how tragic it was that I had chosen not to attend. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. Victoria had always been untouchable. She had built her throne out of lies, stolen money and manipulation, but every throne had its cracks, and I was about to find hers. By noon, I had gathered everything I needed, the financial statements, the bank records, even the old emails she had carelessly sent me in the past, ones where she slipped just enough for me to piece things together now. Wasn't going to burn her down in a fit of rage. That wasn't my style. I was going to make her feel safe first, and then I was going to pull the ground out from under her. I picked up my phone, and for the first time in months I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice smooth and controlled, like she had already rehearsed this conversation in her head. "Elena, I wasn't expecting to hear from you." Of course she wasn't. She thought she had cut me off for good. "I figured it was time we talked," I said, keeping my voice even. "I was hoping we could meet." A pause, then the sound of her sipping her tea. "Meet? Whatever for, to clear the air." I let the words settle between us, dangling just enough uncertainty for her to latch onto. Victoria lived for control, but she also lived for winning, and she believed she had already won, so, predictably, she took the bait. "Fine," she said, voice as sharp as the edge of a knife. "Let's meet." I arrived first. The Hanover Club was exactly as I remembered, a museum of old money and quiet scandals tucked behind crisp white tablecloths and overpriced champagne. When Victoria walked in, she was glowing. Everything about her posture screamed victory. "Elena," she said, sliding into the seat across from me with effortless grace. She didn't hug me. She didn't even fake it. "You look well," she continued, though the smug flicker in her eyes told me she expected the opposite. She thought I would show up broken. I smiled instead. "So do you," I lied. I let her bask in it for a moment, let her enjoy the illusion that she had won, that I was there to seek forgiveness, to make peace on her terms. I let her believe it for exactly 5 minutes, and then I shattered it. "You know," I said, setting my phone on the table, "I never actually believed you would cut me out completely." Victoria raised a brow, sipping her tea. "You cut yourself out, darling. You always insisted on being difficult." That was how she justified it. That was how she rationalized stealing from me, lying to me, making me an outsider in my own family. She called it discipline. She called it teaching me a lesson. But I knew the truth now. I reached into my purse, pulling out a single sheet of paper. I slid it across the table. Her face didn't change at first. Not until she glanced down. Not until she saw what it was. A copy of the redirected life insurance payout, the one meant for me. The color drained from her face. I tilted my head, watching the way she stiffened. The way her fingers curled slightly around her cup as if she could squeeze her composure back into place. That money was supposed to be mine. My voice was quiet but firm. Dad wanted me to have it. She didn't speak, not right away, but I saw the moment her arrogance flickered. "I did what was best for the family," she finally said, but the confidence in her voice was slipping. "No," I corrected, leaning in slightly. "You did what was best for you." For the first time I saw something rare. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of losing control. Because she knew. She knew I had the power to ruin her. "I'm not here to argue, Mother," I said, watching her carefully. "I'm here to give you a choice," she scoffed, the mask slipping back into place. "A choice?" "Yes," I said smoothly. "Either you fix what you broke or I will." I let that settle, let her process the weight of it. Because I wasn't bluffing, I had proof. I had everything I needed to ensure that every single person in her pristine little social circle knew exactly what kind of woman she was. She could try to fight me, she could try to spin another lie, but she knew deep down that this time she wouldn't win. Her kingdom was built on sand and I was about to make it collapse. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. She masked it well, but I caught it. I caught the moment Victoria Carter realized she was no longer in control. "Fine," she finally said, her voice thin and clipped. "What do you want?" I smiled. Now we were getting somewhere. Victoria Carter had spent her entire life controlling narratives, spinning lies so seamlessly that people swallowed them whole. She believed that power was permanent, that reputation was unshakable, that the truth was just a story she could rewrite. She was wrong, and today she was going to learn exactly how wrong. She stared at me from across the table, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the edge of the document I had just handed her. The redirected life insurance payout, the money my father had left for me but had somehow ended up in her account instead. Victoria's expression was unreadable, but I knew her tells. The slight tension in her jaw, the measured inhale as she tried to slow her breathing. She was calculating, trying to decide whether to deny it, to manipulate her way out. I let the silence stretch, let her drown in it. Then she set the paper down, folded her hands neatly over it, and smiled. "A cold, practiced thing. You're being dramatic, Elena." A slow laugh bubbled up my throat. I hadn't expected her to fold immediately, but gaslighting me in the face of undeniable proof? That was bold. "Dramatic?" I repeated, tilting my head. "Mom, you stole money that was legally mine. How exactly is that dramatic?" She exhaled like she was dealing with a petulant child. "I did what was necessary," she said smoothly. "Your father left behind a mess. There were expenses, obligations. I did what was best for the family." "No, you did what was best for you," she bristled, her polished demeanor cracking just a little. "And let's be honest," I continued, leaning in slightly. "You never once thought I'd find out, did you?" Her lips parted, but no words came out because I was right. She had been so confident in my absence, in my silence. She had made sure I was nothing more than a shadow in this family, someone who wouldn't question, wouldn't fight back. She had never prepared for a version of me that fought back. "So," she said, clearing her throat and forcing a smile, "what exactly do you want?" A familiar phrase, but this time it wasn't said with control, it was said with fear. I took my time answering, watching her squirm, letting her feel what it was like to be at someone else's mercy. "I want my money," I said simply, "every last cent." She scoffed. "You can't possibly." I pulled out a second sheet of paper and slid it across the table, a legal demand letter from an attorney I had contacted the night before. It detailed exactly what had been taken, the documentation proving it, and the legal ramifications if the money wasn't returned. Her eyes flicked over the letter. Her face remained unreadable, but I saw the way her fingers trembled ever so slightly as she set it down. "You'd really do this?" she said, voice quieter now. "You left me no choice." A pause, a long heavy silence where I saw the reality finally settle into her bones. This wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. She could fight me, she could try to delay the inevitable, but in the end she would lose. And for a woman like Victoria Carter, losing was the one thing she feared more than anything. Victoria didn't say yes that day. She didn't immediately agree, but I saw the war in her eyes because this wasn't just about money. If this went public, if I pursued this legally, it wouldn't just cost her financially. It would destroy her reputation, and for someone like my mother, that was worth more than money. The next day I got a text from Sophia. "Sophia, Mom's acting weird. Keeps asking about you. What happened?" I stared at the message for a long time before answering. "Me." She finally got caught. A pause, then another text. "Sophia. What are you talking about?" "Me. Ask her." Because if there was one thing Victoria Carter had never prepared for, it was her perfect daughter finding out the truth, and that was a card I was ready to play. It only took 3 days for the cracks to become irreversible. 3 days before Sophia showed up at my apartment, eyes blazing, demanding answers. 3 days before the walls Victoria had built came crashing down. "Tell me she's lying," Sophia said, gripping the printed financial statements I had handed her. Proof that every tuition payment, every gift from our mother had come from my stolen inheritance. "Tell me she didn't actually do this." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to because she already knew the answer. I watched as understanding settled into her, a lifetime of lies unraveling in real time. "She always told me you just disappeared," Sophia whispered, her voice unsteady. "That you didn't care, that you were too busy for us." I clenched my jaw. "Yeah?" I said. "And what do you believe now?" Her hands tightened around the papers. "I believe you." And just like that, Victoria lost her favorite daughter. Sophia was the one who confronted her. I didn't need to be there for it. I already knew how it would go. Victoria would deny, deflect, play the victim. But Sophia wasn't the same girl she had been a week ago. And the moment she looked our mother in the eye and said, "I know what you did," everything was over. Because Victoria Carter's power wasn't built on real strength. It was built on the belief that she was untouchable, and the moment that belief shattered, so did she. By the end of the week I had my money back. Victoria had fought it. She had stalled, pleaded, even tried to offer me hush money in exchange for keeping the truth quiet. But I refused because this wasn't just about money. It was about making her pay, not in dollars but in the one thing she valued more than anything, her legacy. Because now Sophia knew, and soon so would everyone else. I didn't need to ruin her. She had done that herself. I wasn't naive enough to think Victoria would ever change. Women like her didn't change. They simply adapted. They found new ways to manipulate, new people to deceive, but this time, she had no one left. And as I watched Sophia pull away from her, as I saw the panic in my mother's eyes when she realized she had truly lost, I felt something I hadn't in years: relief. She had erased me, she had stolen from me, she had rewritten history to make me nothing, but in the end she was the one who became nothing. And me, I finally got to start over, on my own terms, without her. Victoria Carter had spent a lifetime building an empire out of deception. She had controlled people, twisted narratives, and sculpted the perfect illusion of a mother, a widow, a woman of class. But the thing about illusions? They only work if no one looks too closely. And now, everyone was looking. The cracks in my mother's world didn't just widen, they shattered. It started small, a few whispers, side glances, unanswered invitations. But society had no tolerance for weakness, and my mother, once a pillar of high society perfection, was now something far worse, a scandal. Sophia had stopped returning her calls. The wedding guests had heard the rumors. The Hanover Club, where my mother had once been treated like royalty, had suddenly lost her reservation. She had spent decades cultivating power, but in the end it took less than a week to strip it all away. I should have felt triumphant, and yet watching her lose everything piece by piece wasn't as satisfying as I'd imagined, because I realized something. She was already empty. She had spent so long trying to erase me, so long trying to manipulate Sophia that she had nothing left once we were gone. No family, no power, no one left to fool. I had thought I wanted revenge, but what I really wanted was to finally be free. With my inheritance restored, I could have done anything. I could have left the city, disappeared from my family's history the way my mother had always tried to make me. But I didn't. Instead, I rebuilt my life the way it should have been. I moved into a new apartment, one I didn't have to worry about affording. I left my draining hospital job and took a position at a private clinic where my work was actually valued. I traveled, I read, I lived. For the first time in my life, I was making choices for me, not out of obligation, not out of sacrifice, just because I could. My sister took longer to heal. I don't blame her. She had spent her entire life under my mother's thumb, believing in her version of the truth. It took time to unlearn the lies. But slowly, Sophia began to see my mother for who she really was. It was subtle at first, the way she hesitated before answering her calls, the way she stopped defending her. Then one evening Sophia showed up at my apartment. She stood in my doorway, hands stuffed into the pockets of her designer coat. "I can't believe I didn't see it sooner," she admitted, voice raw. I let her in, made coffee, and for the first time in years we talked like sisters. Not as two women pitted against each other, not as Victoria Carter's daughters, just as Elena and Sophia. I saw my mother one last time. It wasn't planned. I was walking through the city, one of those crisp fall mornings where everything smelled like coffee and burnt leaves. When I saw her, she was sitting outside a cafe alone. The woman who had once been the center of every room, now just another forgotten socialite. She looked up, met my eyes, and for a brief second, I wondered what she would say, if she would apologize, if she would admit defeat. But she didn't. She simply lifted her cup, gave me a thin, hollow smile and looked away because in the end Victoria Carter never lost, not in her mind. She simply adjusted, and I had already spent enough of my life trying to make her see me. So I turned and walked away for good. It took me a long time to stop feeling the weight of her, to stop expecting her voice in my head telling me I wasn't enough. But the thing about reclaiming yourself, you don't wake up one day magically healed. It happens in small moments. It happens when you laugh at something stupid and realize you weren't doing it for someone else's approval. It happens when you book a trip just because you want to go and no one tells you it's a waste of time. It happens when you look in the mirror and finally recognize the person staring back. I didn't win because I destroyed my mother. I won because I built something better, something real, something mine. I never look back, because the best revenge is living a life they can't touch. Betrayal comes in many forms. Sometimes it's loud and obvious. Other times it's quiet, insidious, woven into the smallest cracks of our relationships. But the real question isn't whether you've been betrayed. It's what you do next. So tell me, if you discovered someone had erased you from their life, stolen from you, rewritten your story without your consent, would you fight back or would you walk away and build something better? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story.
After listening to today's story, Perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. *.